Welcome back to Spelling and Word Study. My name is Mrs. Rhoades, and I'm here to get you started on Unit 18, Long I Patterns. Please take a second to gather your materials. You will need your teal book open to page 113. You will also need some colorful pens, markers, crayons, or highlighters. Remember, whatever I mark on my board, you should be marking on your page. Please save room for a key as well. All right, for several weeks now, we have been talking about long vowels. Remember, long vowels say their name. We learned about some common vowel teams. So for instance, if we want to make a long A sound, we can use AI in the middle of a word or AY at the end of a word. We also learned that two common ways to make a long E sound is to use the vowel teams EA in words like read or EE in words like seem. This week we're moving on to long I. And what I want you to notice is while there are several different ways to make long I, there are very few long I vowel teams. But we'll talk more about that in a second. For now, please repeat after me and listen for that I sound in each word. Blind, bright, child, find, flight, fright, grind, night, mighty, and slight. Okay. So there is a vowel team that can make that long I sound, and it is I-E. So when you put I and E together, they will say I in words like pie, lie, and die. So that's a good vowel team to know, but other than in these words, you're not going to see that vowel team very often. Here's a more common long I pattern that you will see quite a bit. The IGH chunk. You find it in words like high, night, fight, light, sight, and right, as well as bright, flight, fright, and night, and mighty, and slight. This is a really good pattern to know because as you can see, it shows up quite often when we're making that long I sound. So over here, purple box equals long I, and it uses the IGH chunk, okay? Really important pattern to know. Now, sometimes I, in the middle of a word, makes a long I sound, and it's unusual because usually if an I is tucked into the middle of a word, it's going to say I. But there's something about this IND pattern. Blind, mind, find, kind, wind. Whenever you see IND in a word, it's going to say the IND sound. The exception would be this word, because sometimes it's pronounced wind, like the pitcher is going to wind up for her pitch, or I need to wind the clock, but it can also be pronounced as wind, okay? So this can say wind, but most of the time when you see IND, it's going to have a long I sound. In shorter words like mind and kind and find, and in longer words like blind, there it is again in find, and grind. Okay, so keep that in mind. That green box also represents a long I because there's an IND chunk. Okay. Now, another time where we see this unusual behavior for I, we have an I tucked in the middle of a syllable saying I instead of it, is when it's followed by ILD in the word child. But you also see it in words like wild or mild, or I think that's it. So wild, mild, and child. Also use a long I sound because of that ILD chunk. Okay, so we are focusing on 3 different ways to make long I this week, using IGH, using IND, or using ILD. Okay. By the way, I wanted you to notice that there is a homophone on our list this week. The word night. This kind of night with a silent K at the front is like in the olden days when you'd hear about kings and queens fighting, kingdoms fighting, there would be knights on horseback. So this kind of knight would be like a soldier. Okay, someone who wears armor. This kind of night is the part of the day when people go to bed and it gets dark outside. So night and night are homophones. Remember, homophones are 2 or more words that sound the same but are spelled differently and have different meanings. I don't see any other homophones on our list this week. I do want to take a minute as we go through our list to just review parts of speech. I bet you guys are getting really good at that by now. So we're going to talk about verbs. We're going to talk about nouns. And we're going to talk about adjectives. Okay? So let's start with verbs. Verbs are things you do. Okay? I can't blind and I can't bright. I can't child, but I can find stuff, right? If things are missing, I can find them. I can't flight and I can't fright. I can grind stuff. Like think of a coffee grinder or a pepper grinder. It takes the beans or the seeds and breaks them into a powder. It crushes them. So we can grind, we can find, but that's pretty much it. All right, nouns are things, people, places, and things. At least concrete nouns are. When you get a little older, you'll learn about abstract nouns. But for now, let's stick to the things. Like a child. That is a noun. Or a flight. I missed my flight. That's a thing, right? You missed the airplane going off into the air. Fright is also a noun, believe it or not, because it's a feeling, right? That loud noise caused a fright. So a fright is a noun. A night is a noun. That's a person. And I think that's it. All right, so we've got verbs, we've got nouns. Let's talk about adjectives. Adjectives are describing words like blind. The blind man used a cane to get around. Blind describes the man who can't see, right? If you're blind, you can't see. Bright is a describing word. It could describe the sunlight, right? The sun was so bright, it made me squint. It could describe someone's clothes. He wore a bright t-shirt. So that's a describing word. Mighty is a describing word. If you think about superheroes, they are mighty. It means strong and powerful. Okay? You're full of might. You're mighty. Slight is also an adjective. Because if something's slight, it means just a little. So maybe Grandma shares her chocolate chip recipe with you, and you make a slight change, just a little change. So instead of adding 1 cup of chocolate chips, you add 1 1/4 cups. It's not a huge change, it's just slight, just a slight little bit of a change. Okay, so those are our parts of speech. I want to talk to you about one more thing. When you get to page 116, you are going to learn about 2 suffixes. The suffixes and est. So, let's look at a word like bright. Okay? When we want to compare 2 things, maybe we're holding up 2 t-shirts, and we want to know which one is brighter. That's not going to work. I'll try brown. Which one is brighter? We take the word bright and we add ER, and that means more bright. If I say that this one is brighter, it's more bright than this one. If I add the suffix EST, brightest, that means the most bright. So I could look at a whole bunch of shirts from my closet and say that one is the brightest one. So these are suffixes that we can add to the end of an adjective, okay? If we add ER, that means more. If we add EST, that means most, okay? So we could take the adjective old, change it to older, oldest. We could take the adjective kind, change it to kinder and kindest, okay? We could take the adjective mighty and change it to mightier and mightiest. So when you get to page 116, you will learn a little bit more about those 2 suffixes, and est. All right, we talked about our vocabulary. We talked about our spelling patterns. You guys are good to go. Good luck, and I will see you next time.